This week I'm going to be speaking with my good friend Jonny Britton, who is the CEO of Landtech. Amongst many other things, we're going to be talking about how the industry is super high risk and what can be done to de-risk it, how it's also so cutthroat, or can be, and how when the idea for the software first came about, I personally wasn't really sure if I wanted it to exist. Jonny, thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here, doing a fireside chat, next to an actual fire.
It's nice, isn't it? I do like that fire. It's one of my favourite things, really. Real wood burning fire. So very nice.
Yeah, I can see you in that cardigan by the fire.
Normally,
chilling out.
Often I sit here smoking my pipe, but it's I don't want to be encouraging that, so we won't be doing that.
Of course.
Anyway, so how's things?
Things good. Things really good. Business going well. Starting to hear a few more bits of positive sentiment in the market, which is, it's all kind of feel like spring is springing a little bit.
It is. So anyway, we'll come on to all of that, but before we do, tell me, in terms of you, where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin? I mean, I can go really deep here, Paul.
Do.
Yeah. In 1982, the year I was born. No.
Where was that? Where were you born?
I was born in Durham. But so the Durham part of the story does come into it. I remember getting first interested in land when the village I lived in, a developer bought the back field where I used to walk my dog and play football, and everyone was kicking about with their mates and things, and they turned it into a housing site. And I remember thinking, do we not have a say in that? Where am I supposed to play football now?
Yeah, interesting.
And that triggered a lot of my interest in not only land but data transparency as well.
So two things there, Angry, because I think I do recall now. Actually, I think you did tell me that a long time ago, that story. But remind me. So how old were you then?
I must have been 10, 11 years old.
Yeah, interesting. So that's a big thing, isn't it? All of a sudden, fucking hell, my playground, my football pitch has been taken away. So this is really good, actually, because it's one of the things I'm trying to do with this whole podcast is get everyone involved in the process of creating homes and places for people to understand how people are affected. So that is like classic, actually. So, do you remember who the developer was?
I've gone back and looked. I think the developer's been bought.
Oh, interesting. You could have a look on Land Insight, couldn't you?
Oh, I know who. I could probably get that information, but I remember thinking a couple of times, I wonder who that was at the time. But that happened. I mean, just all around the village, they took the land near where I walk my dog by the river and turned that into diggerland. And I remember thinking, oh, come on, you've taken away my football pitch. You've taken away where I walk my dog.
Mate, you're not telling me you don't go to Diggerland.
I've never been to Diggerland. I refuse to go to Diggerland. I mean, it's sure it's very good, I'm not going to say anything against it, but I hate it. But all this stuff, it sparked my interest, and I wonder sometimes, I'm actually just solving my own childhood problems, but I'm not really, am I? This is literally one of the big problems with the planning system. So, giving a voice to people and building in line with what people need and making sure everyone's heard. These are real issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started getting a bit interested in land and thinking about it at a really young age. Then what happened?
I followed that through school, geography and usual things like that, but then did a town planning course at university.
Where'd you do that?
In Manchester. So I did the 4-year undergraduate master's degree. Actually did it jointly with landscape planning and management and town planning. They were the two things together. And then I became a town planner and worked in Manchester for about a year. But while I was at uni, a lot of things were happening. First of all, I was on the side of my course, I was doing entrepreneurial things. Setting up a ski club and doing an entrepreneur society. And at the same time, social media came in a big way. We all had these brick-like mobile phones that were just about able to get on the internet, And within a few years of being at uni, it was like faster and better camera, and people were using it more often. Social media was coming in, Facebook was coming in, everything was happening at a rapid speed. We were going online for all our work. That just wasn't a thing a few years back, and it was like happening at super fast speed. So when I became a planner, I was like, this is kind of
all a bit ancient.
Yeah, I'm driving around delivering paper documents, and you know, I'm being charged out at quite a large hourly rate to just gather bits of information that is easily available, but it's hard. You've got to know where to look. And so I was thinking, you know, this seems very inefficient, and someone who could afford me and all these other people to do that work, they're doing all right for themselves. So, you know, I was kind of very curious about the whole thing and how everything worked, and at the same time super interested in technology and the speed that was moving at. And I decided to leave the industry, and I went and learned to code. I worked with my dad actually, and I put all his life's work online. He's a historian, and he made all these maps of history, and I digitized them, and I made them animated, and we did these lovely programs for schools, and we had a fantastic first year. I learned to code, and I built all the software, and it was selling like hotcakes. I was like, amazing, this all works. But once again, this speed of technology got me, and Steve Jobs came along and put everything on an iPhone, and then all our software didn't work anymore.
Oh, really?
And you know, all websites became more interactive, and it went from kind of selling things on CD-ROMs to downloading onto computers, and then ultimately in the cloud, and that got us quite hard. It just changed our business model. We didn't have anyone's email addresses. We used to just send them hard copies of things. So the thing that I really fell in love with also, you know, was it caused us problems with our business, but it made me really learn that you've got to be on the front foot with technology. You've got to keep on moving with all the trends. You've got to be using it. You can't let it come and get you. And this again fascinated me. So I've always loved that kind of dynamic nature of things. So that business is actually going okay, millions of users all around the world, but working with a 7-year-old historian who doesn't want to manage anybody is not a way to scale something, and I really wanted to get involved with all the kind of something else that could really take off.
So what sort of year was that?
That was about 2000 and between about 2007, 8, and yeah, but I did that for about 5 years, so 2013 or something.
Then what happened next?
Then a few serendipitous things happened. I was staying with my parents at my parents' house, and they went on holiday, and they were supposed to leave me with the car, but they accidentally took the car keys with them. So I was left in this village back in the northeast, where I've kind of, haven't got that many friends up there that way anymore. I've lived away in Manchester for a long time. So I was kind of stuck without, being able to go very far or do very much. And it was quite nice in some ways. I was contemplating my future move, and I was on Twitter at the time, and more than I would ever have usually been, because I was bored in the house, and I saw this tweet saying that someone was looking for a co-founder to help them with their land startup, to help open up the land market. And I was like, all right, okay. You had the typical light bulb moment. I started thinking, wow, this is something I could help with here. I've done the technology side of things, I've done the land side of things. So I got in touch with this guy, Andrew Moist, and I sent him an email, and he sent me a long email back, and then he sent me this really long email. I sent a really long email back, and this isn't efficient. We decided to meet up, and that was like just after Christmas, or just after Christmas, before New Year of 2014, And by the 14th of January 2014, we'd set up a business together called Land Technologies.
Just a quick word to say thank you to our sponsors, Landtech, creators of Land Insight, which is the industry-leading bit of software to help developers find and analyse the potential of real 100% off-market development opportunities. I've been involved in the business for over 10 years now, and if you don't know what it basically does what people like me used to have to do the old-fashioned way, which is hunt around and get together all of the key information that's needed in order to make sensible decisions on the development potential of land. So that's planning data, market research, lists of all of the various constraints, environment and agency information, you name it, massive long list of all of the stuff that you need in order to find out who owns land, what policy constraints there might be, and exactly what you may or may not be able to do with it. All of the industry leading developers use it, and also the most clued up smaller ones. So if you're not already using it and you want to trial for yourself, have a look in the show notes. You'll find a link to get a free trial, test it for yourself, see what you think, and hopefully get busy finding real off-market development opportunities. So thanks again to our show sponsors, Landtech, and let's get back to the show.
We then spent a couple of years working out what to do to try and help, where we could best help make a more efficient open land market to enable property development. And there's quite a few interesting steps along the way. Andrew had discovered this problem for himself. He was a software developer working in Shoreditch at around 2012, 2013, and he was these software developers, these like godlike figures. They barely walk on earth with this mere mortals. They get paid a fortune, super high in demand. So he's getting paid well, but he couldn't afford to buy a house. And he's thinking to himself, this is ridiculous. But he's an engineer. He's thinking, maybe I could build my own house. So he started getting curious about that, going to the build shows and thinking, actually, this is, I can get all my materials. I can find an architect. I could do this. Where should I put it? And in Shoreditch at the time, it's not like as all these glass buildings like you have now. It's run down and it's derelict, and there's quite a few issues actually. It was pretty ropey area, and full of tech companies working out a cheap space. So he sees all this derelict land, and he's like, I think it's I call it like a beautifully idiotic question, but he said, well, maybe I could put my house there. Perfectly innocent, great question. So he goes, well, I need some land. There's some land. I'll try and work out who owns it, see if I can buy it. And he's like, starts this journey of going, well, I can't work out who owns this piece of land. How do you find out who owns a piece of land? And then he's like, actually, come on, there's more space than just one house here. So how many houses can you get on this piece of land? And how on earth does anybody work out how to work out what the kind of opportunity is for a piece of land? And is there a record somewhere or a system to help me? And he starts looking at the planning system. Was like, I don't know how to make head or tail of this planning system. What does it all mean? And even if I could build it, like, what's the market value? Why is nobody doing anything with this land right now? Wait a minute, we're in a housing crisis. I can't afford to buy a piece of land, and there's loads of land. Something seems amiss here. And plus, I want to be a property developer, and he did some research. None of the self-builders are actually able to do their projects. So there was a study at the time, it said something like in Austria, and all around Europe, they build millions of self-built homes a year. Yeah. But in the UK, it's very small, it's like 10,000 a year maybe. And he's like starting to see, wait a minute, there was a survey done, there's millions of wannabe self-builders in the UK. tiny fraction of them do it, loads of land, but it's really hard to unlock these pieces of land. So he thought he could solve the problem for self-builders by trying to help them find land to put their projects on. Completely rational, makes sense. Problem, try to find the solution to that. So we spent quite a lot of time exploring all of the opportunities there. And what we found was that there was a lot of appetite to build, but the self-builders, there's no what they really need is a site with planning ready to go, because if they don't have that, they have to go and find a site, and then they have to work out how to do the planning and all these expensive costs and technical things, and they just weren't really geared up to think like that. They'd got quite emotional about wanting to build a property, but not about finding a piece of land to buy.
Yeah, and before you go on, it's worth explaining to the viewers and the listeners, because many of those are very established, but some of them are fairly beginnery as well. And what you're talking about here, those problems actually apply to everyone involved in the house building and development industry. So at its simplest, self-building, someone wants to find a plot to build one house, but even if you're Barratt's the biggest developer in the country, all those issues are and were the same.
Absolutely the same. Absolutely the same. The inefficiency of having to go around all these different portals and pull it together to do an assessment of a piece of land was so inefficient that I think that largely the industry became driven by agents, and they became developers, house builders often just lent on their network to be given sites, and then they'd go off and they'd do the research.
Some of them did, just so you know. They were not the cleverest ones. But yeah,
everybody knew that we talked to. So everyone in the self-build industry, they didn't have a clue what to do with all this, and they weren't really interested. We couldn't find a product to sell to them. When we were talking broadly to the industry, and we were saying, how do you buy? How do you find land? How do you unlock land? And everyone's talking about off-market land. And we're like, okay, so what do you do? And people were like, I'm not sure I want to tell you how to find off-market land, because if I tell you, it's like the route to the gold mine. If you can find a piece of off-market land, you can get planning approved, and the value of the land goes up, thousands of percent potentially, and then you can build the homes, and then you can add additional value. It's super valuable if you do little projects. You can make a lot of money. Do big projects, obviously it's harder, but you can make loads of money. And so we had to kind of we were trying to decipher how to create a process for that, and what we thought would still give it to self-builders. Ultimately, they didn't want to do deals with landowners, and they didn't want to go and do all the legwork. So we couldn't, but when the people who were telling us how they did things, they were super interested in what we were doing, because if you're going to take, say 3 hours to gather the information for a piece of land, if you do look at 10 plots, it's like 30 hours. And just because you've looked at 10 plots doesn't mean the vendor's going to sell you something. So that's like a full-time job for somebody, just looking at very small quantities of sites. But if we could bring all that information into one place and make the assessment just a couple of minutes, then they could look at hundreds of sites and then really run a proper process to find the most valuable sites and the best sites. And we could unlock, instead of self-building, small, medium-sized developers to find really good opportunities and start to build more homes that could at least solve the housing crisis in a different kind of way. And that's the mission we've been on ever since.
So let's jump back a bit, because obviously we all know what Land Insight does now, which is amazing, and we'll get into some of the detail of that in a while, including all the latest features and bits and pieces. But to start with, knowing what it needed to do is was a key thing, because obviously, as you mentioned, the few people that were really good at finding land, the old-fashioned way, let's just call it, by digging out all of that information and coming up with clever angles and finding proper off-market sites, don't really want anyone to know, really, because like you said, that, you know, that is a big angle, a big advantage over the rest of the market. So how did you end up with that information?
That's, yeah, it was really hard, and that's why it took so long. But I mean, meeting you was helpful. I mean, I don't know if you remember how we met, but I think we said, you know, we've got some ideas for some software. Can we come along on your course? And we tried to blag it in, and I know you were interested for some reason, but I'm pretty sure we couldn't afford to pay your course subscription, but we had a few meetings anyway. But I think even you were like, of the attitude of like, wait, I've worked for how many years to gather all this information?
Well, that was a bit of a leading question, to be honest, because I didn't want to tell you, and the interesting story, I think I've told you this since, but at the time, you know, when you first started talking about the idea, I was like, fucking hell, this could be really good. But actually, it's not just self-builders, you know, this is massive. And then, you know, we talked about investing and stuff like that. And for, you know, quite a while, we had quite a few meetings, if you remember, usually involved having a few beers.
Yep.
And I was thinking, I'm not sure if I really want to, you know, give up any of the secrets. But in the end, I just thought, well, look, at some point, someone's going to do it. So might as well be in the middle of it, you know?
Yeah. Well, we were gonna get there. It's like it's a never-ending thing, really. There's lots of different strategies and ways of doing things, but we were figuring out quite a lot. And you were right. You had the right attitude. I mean, I think you've always kind of taken the approach that, you know, you wanted to educate people, and you've wanted to help do something of a bit of a greater mission than just build some homes for you to sell. I mean, that's always the impression you've given with the courses you've done, and I guess podcasts like this. So you had like, it might have taken you a little while to come round to the idea, but you certainly helped us refine what we were doing in the early days. And you know, what we found was just doing something quite small would make a big difference. And the initial thing that we started with was, well, there's two things actually. We got very lucky with timing, because the land registry opened up its data that we could, so people could pay for what they used to pay £3 per title. They now got the commercial and corporate data set for free, so they could avoid paying £3, and they could just pay us a subscription and use that as much as they wanted. But on top of that, we put planning applications, and you know, we could have done many other things, but now the product's got a whole range of things. But then you kind of, you know, I won't get into all the technical strategy of things, but we built what you call a moat in the software world by finding a way to gather all the planning applications from the council websites. And so a developer can see the precedents and how the council's thinking about things, and approval rates and all this nice stuff. So we gathered that, and that was a really difficult technical challenge at the time, in order to put a dot on a map in the right place.
Yeah, I remember. Nightmare, wasn't it?
Absolute nightmare. But having those dots on the map really helped us break through. And when that became really useful, those couple of things became really useful for you, and then other people started buying it, then you get this nice feedback cycle, because everyone's telling you, oh, can you do this, and can you do this, and can you do this? And you try and understand what the problems are that they're really trying to solve for themselves, and then the feedback starts to come in after that.
Yeah. So something you said earlier actually just reminded me of something really, really interesting. I remember in the early days, and this what I'm just about to say gets to like sort of like part of the fundamental problem with planning and housing, right? And that is obviously the imbalance between supply and demand. Yeah. So we all know that there's a massive need for housing, particularly affordable housing. Lots of people want to be able to build it and create it, but it's really not easy to do for all sorts of reasons that we might get onto later. But the planning system in particular keeps, restricts the supply of available developable land. So, as a result, it is very, very competitive. You've got a lot of stuff that someone wants and needs, i.e. land with planning potential, and not a lot of it. So understandably, it can be a bit of a, cutthroat industry. And understandably, people don't want to sort of give away their secrets. Now, that's how I was for a long time personally, and it's why I didn't really want to sort of like, tell you what was what. I was all like, oh fucking hell, I'd like to get more housing created, and I'd like to help other people, but I don't want to give away all of my little angle and stuff like that. And there were still a lot of people like that. Now, probably more than 10 years ago, when Landtech first started, I started getting all a bit hippie-fied, and that has increased since then, hence the cardigans, right? But so I don't really sort of care anymore, and I actually think it's just more important to do whatever is possible to create, get more good quality houses and homes and places created, yeah? But I remember very often we used to have conversations about what was the mission was to create an honest and open land market. Do you remember?
I think I was on the front of our pitch deck.
And I was saying, people don't want that. People don't want that. In terms of the customer, all house builders, big ones, small ones, they don't really, or didn't really, a lot of them still probably don't, want an honest and open land market. They just want to know how to find the deals and stuff for themselves, yeah? They don't want everyone to know because there isn't enough of it. So that sort of comes back to the key problem still is planning. If planning was pro-development enough, not for any old rubbish, obviously, for the right stuff in the right place, but and much easier, and therefore there was an easier land market, then people wouldn't have to be so secretive and sneaky, and it wouldn't be so sort of cutthroat,
Oh, I think that's exactly right. The opaque nature of land and planning kind of has led to it being so cutthroat, and I think that hasn't helped developers at all, because the worst stories get out there a bit, and it's almost like the rules of the game. I sometimes think only really the hardiest and the strongest have survived in property development. Because that's the rules of the game. Someone's there and they're going to bid harder than you or be more aggressive than you in the market, and has led to and along with the macroeconomic shocks that you have to overcome, and the resilience needed to get back on your feet and build up again, and developers have really got a tough job to do, and it's been bizarre because there is a bit of a reputation thing of the developer being a bit of the bad guy, a wheeler dealer, but the challenges they face and against this backdrop, it's meant that that's the kind of, sometimes the characters have done particularly well in it. But it led us to make a kind of slightly controversial point of view, where we said, actually, the developer's the hero here. They're the one building the homes. They're the one who've got all these tough challenges, and if we make it easier for them, more people can get involved and build a bigger, more diverse range of things that communities actually need. And we're trying to help the developers, and we real advocates for the challenges that the developers face, because the planning system, it makes everything unpredictable. How do you build businesses in an unpredictable work environment? It's really tough, and so we are very pro the developer, but we're also trying to help them, change the market as well.
Well, and that's Brilliant, because that's where obviously we're sort of totally aligned, really, because you know, and again, it's one of the reasons for creating and doing this podcast, right? I want everyone involved in the industry and outside the industry in particular, actually, you know, local people that would typically object, people that think that, you know, all developers are greedy arseholes and the bad guys, and, you know, and there are a lot of them are arseholes, really, and I'm trying to change that, which is one of the reasons I started my training business, to teach them that there is a sort of better way to do it. You know, it is, so it's hard and it is really difficult, but you can do it without being an arsehole, you know. But it's really, really, really not easy. So the more people, you know, look, and I'm not expecting the general public ever to feel sorry for property developers, right? But you know, at the end of the day, it is largely us that have to create the housing, yeah? Housing associations obviously do a great job. Councils are trying to build houses, but they got all sorts of pressures and it's not easy for them to do. So really, it is the private house building sector, and particularly like smaller ones and SMEs, that really need to be supported and encouraged to you know, and have tools like Landtech to make it easier, because otherwise the housing problem crisis is just not going to get solved.
And I think that you know, you saw that, we saw that, but the conversation where how to solve the housing crisis had nothing to do with technology. It's all been kind of policy swings, this and incentivization of this, and, you know, boost the consumer spending ability. You know, this is actually kind of making things worse. This is not actually solving the real problem.
Yeah.
It's making affordability go up, unaffordability go up, rather than the supply side measures. And so technology really does have a place, and it should be more part of the conversation, I think. And the challenges that the developers can face with public persona and engaging with the public can be really enabled in a very positive way through technology. And so we've gone from a journey from going, we're going to help you find a piece of land with some technology, to going, actually, you've got a mountain to climb before you could unlock this piece of land, and we're going to help you every step of the way to get you ready for construction. And that can be things from scheme design through going through planning and helping communicate and collaborate with the community through platforms that enable digitization, to give a voice to the majority.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I love that, right? Because one, you know, big focus of this whole thing inside property development is about collaboration and trying to get, you know, everyone to understand each other's point of view a little bit more and work together in order to get more good quality housing created. And so it's got to be more, you know, collaboration rather than confrontation, really. And I know that's something that you've, you know, recently bought another business to help make that happen. Tell us about that.
Yeah, fantastic business called the business is called Built ID. The product's called Give My View, and a really great team who've been doing amazing work, which and it's like the planning notices you saw on lampposts, which were basically the only way, or maybe there's something in the newspaper to say there's going to be a development happening on a site. They've digitized that whole process, and so when you go onto the platform, you can see the site, you can see proposals, you can see options, and you can start to give your own thoughts and feelings about the kind of things that would enable that site to work better for the area around it, and which you live in. And that means that a couple of things. Developers get really good information about what they can do to make the site more accommodating for the local community. So when they go and submit in their planning application, have to run a public consultation, they've got people who've contributed to the site and actually pro the site, because the developer's listening and the developer's shown that they care, and the developer is changing the scheme to accommodate what they would like to see happening. And then the second really interesting thing is that rather than it just being kind of like a bunch of NIMBYs who turn up at the town hall or the scout hut, it actually becomes, you give a voice to the silent majority, the people who are at work, the people with kids who can't turn up, the elderly people who might be feeling lonely or vulnerable, and they just want some better lighting in the area. You give an opportunity for them to engage where they are, and this gives very positive amounts of support to the application as well, which can overcome many of the challenges.
Yeah, and I've got to say, so this is brilliant actually, and developers of all sizes, big and small, really need to jump on this. The best ones would already be sort of like trying to do things this way, but actually offline it is way harder actually, because one of the biggest problems in development, as we all know, it's planning, and particularly the politics of planning and NIMBYism, and what you're doing there has got brilliant for completely reversing that. So to create YIMBYism, which is a thing, as we know, where people actually are happy for development to take place if and where where they live, as long as it considers what is really needed and it's done in the right way. Because, typically NIMBYs are older people, they just are. If you look at the statistics for it, they typically are. They've already got a house or a home, they've done all right, probably bought a place 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago when it was way easier than it is now. And the fact of the matter is, and this is one of the biggest problems in planning really, is just human nature and the fact that people don't like change. I can tell you some, in fact I will tell you a classic little story, just as an example. So, and I know you know this anyway, but this is just really to sort of drum it into other people out there, I bought a site in Acton in West London, probably about 25 years ago, I'm going to say, So it was an old furniture. So this is in the middle of Acton town centre, right? So in really good sustainable location in West London, right? It was a furniture maker's. It was an old factory, just there for historic reasons. It had been there for years. So big long site, front in the main road. It was a furniture factory. It was 4 stories, corrugated clad, horrible looking thing. They were in there at all hours, machines going, making a whole load of racket, fumes, noise, been pissing people off, something chronic for years. Big lorries coming and going, everywhere. People were hating it for years, right? And it backed onto a row of quite nice, Victorian houses, Anyway, I tied up the site, submitted planning application. People went absolutely bonkers, right? So you've got this thing here that they've been hating for years, right on the boundary of their back gardens, overshadowing them, noise, blah, 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 blah. Because now I'm proposing the development, they hated it. Objections, and it was a good scheme, right? As I like to think all my schemes are. But anyway, they were objections, petitions, usual story. The planners originally were pro it. The politics completely reverse that, too many objections, this ain't going to go down well, let's just refuse it, right? Which is what happens, what happened and what happens a lot. Anyway, so I appealed, won it, built it, and afterwards everyone loved it. And that's that, and I can tell you so many stories about that. That is, what happens a lot, as long as you're doing good stuff. But it's just change and human nature that scares people. And it's almost, I think, probably the older they are, the more set in their ways, the more they don't want things to change. They don't need things to change because they've already got a house and now I'm all right, Jack, basically. And that has been the key problem for years.
People don't want change thrust upon them. And you're right. Look, a home is someone's biggest asset that they're likely to ever buy, and they get concerned that, if something going to get more houses in the area, maybe my house price isn't going to be as valuable anymore. But I think even using data, you can start to prove these things wrong as well, because that is not the case, especially when you've got such a massive lack of supply coming through. It doesn't matter how much supply you put in, there's still going to be so much more needed. People's house prices are not affected by a new nice replacement for an old shoddy building with some nice brand new housing. This gives a boost to the area. People eat in the local cafes. The streets are safer. Housing is a real benefit to an area, and I think there's an old kind of mindset that people have where it's, they don't like change thrust upon them. They're concerned about the house prices. But if they're part of that change and they can see some stories and some data about how change is positive, I think we can start to change these attitudes a bit. Yeah,
no, I think so. And the good thing is certainly in terms of when it comes to tech, like I say, historically, people that turn up at planning meetings and complain do tend to be older for all sorts of reasons. One of the big ones being they've got a lot of time on their hands. So for some of them, like what else are they going to do apart from get involved in, complaining about something? I mean, it might sound a bit extreme, but in my experience, that is the way it has been, Whereas, younger people, perhaps they're busy at work or, like say, young families looking after their kids doing stuff, it's like say, it's it's the vocal minority, NIMBYs, that typically gets heard, whereas, there's lots of other people that are consulted, they're too busy to respond to like they think, oh yeah, that's not bad, I quite like that, or yeah, but they're not gonna go out of their way to make a big deal about it. So very often, and of course it's a big if, when good development is proposed, and that is the key really, it's got to be good stuff, not shite, right? And that's for me with the whole training business, I'm trying to flip. Get rid of the rubbish developers, to be honest, and create more that want to do things the right way. And there are loads and loads and loads like that. Development's way different now to it was, 30 years ago. When you have got good development and you've got tools like, you've now created, and you do get the YIMBYs, typically the younger people, and they can respond easily online, then, I think politicians in particular, once they start realising that, actually housing and good, getting good quality housing created, it's actually a vote winner, not a vote loser, then things should really start to flip,
Yeah, I mean, I really not only think that's going to happen, but I know it's happening now.
Yeah.
We've got dozens and dozens and dozens, I can't remember if it's hundreds of users on the Give My View platform now, with case study after case study proving this works.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a continuous change, and people really should be getting on board with it.
A lot of this consultation stuff and NIMBYism is really, I think, the thing that has impacted planning policy probably the most, actually, in a lot of ways. So the politics of planning is what causes the problems, really, to be quite honest. Interesting around that whole NIMBYism thing, which is a thing, it's a massive thing, and probably the thing that's impacted planning policy the most, I think. I think you've met a few housing ministers since Landtech's been going. Tell me what you think about the politics of planning.
Oof. I mean, I think you're right by saying that it's the politics that hold it back. It's a bit of an interesting one. I mean, I can't. I'm not a planner anymore, and I can't claim to know about it. But as much as lots of other people. But we have to react to the policy changes that our customers will find beneficial. So one of the benefits, which is not really talked about, of the UK system is that it can be somewhat dynamic at a national level. because I know people have talked about zoning and bringing in zoning and things like that. And the thing that gets levelled at that is that, well, first of all, it's not as prescriptive and predictable as people think it is. And there's a ton of negotiation that goes on, but it's also generally done at a regional level. And so you can't make a big swing of the axe and change things very easily. But you can in the UK. So we've seen things like as simple as being able to turn a farm building from 2 dwellings into 5 dwellings, or B1C, industrial sites being able to be used for homes. And then more recently, we've seen city centre buildings, and the E-class come in, and so you can do more flexible things with them to kind of regenerate city centres. So there's some good stuff that happens when we always have to change our maps and our data sets and identify these areas to our clients. So there's some good stuff, but it's bogged down by the politics and the instability that is created. And I don't know if you've got the answer to this. Why is there so many housing ministers? Nobody lasts more than, say, 6 months or a year. I've met probably 10 of them in the last 5 or 6 years. I remember going in to meet Sajid David in the Houses of Parliament. I mean, I can't remember how long ago that was. I think I met people before him. This does not create a steady environment.
It's diabolical, isn't it? Because as we know, planning and housing is not simple, and there's even it takes people years to probably understand it and get their heads around it, and even then there's a lot that don't. So for someone to come in for 6 months or 9 months or even 2 years, if you're lucky, it is just diabolical, isn't it? Really. It is just such a massively important thing that it seems to get treated so unimportantly, really.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things, there's talk about a change in government now. It looks that's currently the direction of travel as we talk now. Yeah. And we hear a lot of consultation about the green belt. And when we go back to NIMBYs and the green belt, this is some of the biggest, most emotional, least understood area. And we did a huge study on this, by how much of the green belt could be developed upon without touching any nice kind of environment. Yep. I'm all for creating good environments. At a landscape planning degree, I'm interested in protecting my own areas.
Me too.
I want a good environment for everybody. There's so much rubbish on the green belt, and we're easily enough to build a huge amount of homes and unlock really sites like
sustainable locations. Well, I was going to say, look, and what we'll do. So obviously, some people might be listening to this on audio. Some people will be watching on YouTube. What we'll do is I'll actually add on some links or before and after pictures to this place. So, you saw it at the beginning. We're in Chalfont St Giles. This is my latest development. Gets launched to the market next week, actually. Hence, thought I might as well, have a nice little, do a podcast in front of the fire while we can. But this site had a 35-year history. Well, before I tell you, right, so it was greenbelt and also an area of outstanding natural beauty. Yeah. But the site was literally covered in dilapidated old farm buildings. It was a little small holding, became unviable in the 80s, and sat here fall into rack and ruin for many years. So when you see what was on this site, and then hopefully what we've created, which I personally think is great. I think it will surprise a lot of people, because green belt is not what everyone imagines, and that's part of the problem. I think the general public in particular think green belt means beautiful farms and fields and forests and woods and stuff like that, which I totally don't want to be touching at all. I'm very much into nature and the environment, and actually it's a really cool organisation called Building with Nature, which looks to support and encourage developers to it won't surprise you, build with nature, right? So we've followed all of their principles here. I actually think that those building with nature principles should be part of policy, and they actually apply. Well, if any greenbelt sites are going to be released anywhere, it's on the basis that you've got to follow the building with nature principle. So I'm going to do we'll do a whole load of episodes with the building with nature people. It's honestly, it's super cool. So they are the principles we followed here. And when you see people see the before and after, they'll be like, Jesus Christ, I didn't realise that stuff like that was green belt, and isn't that much better than how it was before. And just for example, this site here, before I came along, had a 35-year history of planning refusals. Yeah. So when and it basically took me 5 years, and I still had to win it at appeal. So it's basically 40 years. And I would imagine when people see how it was before to how it is now, they'll be like, how the fuck did it take 40 years to get permission to change that to that? And then perhaps they might understand just how problematic parts of the planning system are,
Yeah, I think, what you've done here is nobody's going to say that this isn't exactly the kind of thing that needs to happen to all that massive volume of sites that can be found in the Greenbelt. And so, it's really good. And in terms of the politics of planning, there's an interesting thing that, the biodiversity net gain.
Yeah.
So that's, I really like the principle of regenerative design,
me too, yeah.
and leaving the environment in a kind of better state that can keep on progressing after something's been done with the site. I think that's just a generally good principle that a lot of developers would be behind and would like to bring in for themselves. It's often the implementation. It's clogged up the whole system, and people not only in these high interest rate economic environments, but then they can't get planning through as well. It's caused loads of problems, and these are the kind of things that just wasn't well thought through. If you can be the consultant now for these sites, they must be getting paid a fortune.
Well, again, it's one of the reasons for doing this. So we will be talking in future episodes. There's all experts from every sector, every little aspect involved, including ecologists, politicians, local authority planners, NIMBYs, all sorts of people. Because part of the problem is that there's not many people really fully understand the bigger picture and how it all fits together, really. So, I've got to tell you now, so, as a developer, I'm literally at the coalface trying to find sites, negotiate deals, meet landowners' expectations, beat existing use values in order to incentivise them to sell. And then, of course, I have to go away and try to get planning permission and deal with all of the stuff that I need to deal with, including the costs and the financial implications of all of that, and to try to get a deal to stack up and still, hopefully make a few quid and make it be worthwhile. So I absolutely know everything that's involved and how hard it is, right? Lots and other, most other people involved in the system sort of don't. They're all thinking in their own sort of little boxes, and which is sort of understandable, but they don't understand the knock-on implications of what that actually means for viability and and development, and ultimately the supply of housing. So the more conversations like this can happen with everyone involved in the process, and hopefully people can watch this and start realizing, oh shit, wow, I didn't quite realize it was like that, then I think things will be better when we can start working together.
I think that everybody would be of a similar view. There was some good work with the public-private partnerships, and I don't know if you remember, we had an event and we got the government down and we got SME developers down, and both sides said it was one of the most productive meetings that they'd ever had. It's just getting everyone bogged down in the wrong stuff at the moment.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem. That's what I say. This whole thing with housing ministers, it takes a long time to understand this stuff. So if you're in and out in 6 months, 9 months, a year or whatever. For some of them, they're probably literally just getting their head around it, and then they're off, you know. So it's crazy, really.
It does all see. When the last time we met, I don't even know if I bothered to remember their names now.
I hardly do, you know, because I just think that they're not going to be around for it. Isn't it terrible that it's got to be, that it's so ridiculous that I'm just like, I know nothing's going to happen. I know they're just going to be like moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic again, and then they'll be off and it's on to the next one.
Well, she brought people together. She got people in the room, and really good ideas going. Listened to us all, and yeah, they're gone.
Labour are probably going to be in soonish, I would imagine, and hopefully, you know, it's going to be, you know, all a bit of a fresh start. They're saying all the right things at the moment. Hopefully, you know, we can all get involved with them trying to explain how it really works and help them get more good stuff created. But they've got to listen. This is the thing. So I remember, now you may or may not have come across this, so it's interesting you saying, you know, she was listening and all the rest of it. I've been part of so many think tanks and stuff like that, whereby I remember, and I can't remember if it was something we did through Landtech, or it might have been the part of the small developers group and the HBF, the Home Builders Federation, who do some really, really good stuff. Anyway, I was on this sort of like, you know, private consultation call with the minister at the time, and I can't even remember who it was. Again, I think I can, but I'm not sure. The minister at the time, Joanna Averley at the time, the chief planner, and you know, a few other sort of like high level people, and you know, it was meant to be a consultation thing, talking to some sort of, you know, established people in the industry about what they think about stuff like that. So there was me and about 6 or 7 other people, and you know, we were all sort of having a chat and all the rest of it, and you could just tell they'd already made their mind up. They weren't listening. Someone would like, you'd say something, and they'd say, "Oh, well, yeah, what's that?" So like, so that means this, and i.e. this being the thing that they'd already decided to do. And it's like, no, it's nothing to do with that. Basically, so this is the thing. I don't know to what extent some people really listen, or maybe they do, but probably, and then the politics get involved, and it's like, oh well, yeah, we don't really want to do that. So I think it is frustrating.
There's definitely some. Well, I mean, there's a public perception piece. You seem to engage the industry, and you know how much you're just getting lots of feedback, so you can back it up with your policy points of view. I think there's definitely some stuff there. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go into the weeds, right? But we've kind of seen some of this firsthand, and actually, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a complaint when it can be in your favour for the private sector. But we sold our software to Enfield Council, and had amazing feedback for us. They said that what used to take a really long time, they could do a real doddle. It was a complete positive ROI, but then their budget for software got cut just as part of a sweep and change to the councils. Then so they had to go and employ a standard set of consultants to do it, like 100 grand, 150 grand, who did it a really long, slow and expensive way, and that's the only way they could operate. We gave that case study, you know, we were speaking to Enfield Council at the time. We gave that case study in one of these roundtable events to help the politicians who want to make councils more efficient understand the way the software can help. So, you know, from our point of view, if we can start to help the government to procure software to councils in an easier way, that's a good thing, because they really need it. However, the councils have got to get on board, and they've got to, you know, make it easier, because I've got a group of salespeople who we could sell to councils, but it takes 6 months, and nobody wants to turn up.
And it's worth saving. One, it would save them fortunes, and two, you know this as well. It's a classic. You know, councils talking about and I know people, and we'll get some on people from the estates department in councils and stuff like that. I know for a fact there's lots and lots of councils, they don't even know what land they own. So they're talking about, council house building, which is definitely something that should happen much more. But again, it comes back to a lot of them, they haven't got the budgets and the resources to even find their own land, let alone actually, get planning and make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, you would have kind of thought that a Tory government would at least enable them to buy things to become more efficient and to help out. But I don't know, I feel like I'm Tory bashing there, but it's not necessarily their responsibilities, but it's something's baffling going on where they can't even buy software to enable them to do a job. We could do that for them in seconds. They could get all the information they need, wouldn't have to dig around in archives. They could even do loads more with it, compare it with other data sets to make better decisions, but they're just not able to do it.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Well, hopefully, I'll get some people on and we might find out why that is and what could maybe be able to be done about that. I'm going to jump back a bit actually onto PD, permitted development. So you mentioned that, right? And I can understand, there are lots of developers out there, particularly smaller ones and newer ones, that like it because they can do small little deals. They can split a old office up into some flats or retail now, and obviously you've got all the Class C stuff. But and I can see why government have sort of enhanced the permitted development rights, so more stuff can be easier developed, let's call it. It's a bit of a faster track route to planning. But I actually think, personally, I don't like a lot of it. I think very often you end up just polishing turds, making it easier to just convert old buildings that might not be that attractive. And now that comes back to government and politics, right? They it's easier because converting buildings that already exist is going to get less flack from objectors and stuff like that. But it doesn't create brilliant housing. It doesn't create brilliant environments. And like I say, I think very often you are polishing turds. There's not all of it, but there's a lot of rubbish that's got created as a result of PD. So interestingly, differently to a lot of developers, I'm pretty anti-PD actually, in a lot of ways, and I think it was just easy. It was just like easy, good PR and a little bit more housing for government, rather than doing anything to create, make it easier to create good stuff. Now, but like I can of course understand the attraction from developers' points of view, because it is a little bit easier. And the normal planning system, let's just call it, is just so difficult and such a nightmare. It's almost like, why? I can see why lots of people would be incentivised to go for the easy option, but it doesn't create the best places. So,
but would you not just to ask the question? Really, what you want is the best scheme for the site, the most suitable scheme that's going to add value to the area. And
absolutely,
just converting it isn't necessarily the best thing to do.
That's right.
So, what are the alternatives? Why do they even have PD in the first place? Is it a carrot to dangle to people to show them opportunities?
Well, do you know what? It's really interesting. So there is actually one, I think, really good PD, and it's Class ZA. Where you can effectively take the, subject to the usual few exclusions and stuff like that, but you can take the footprint, take an existing building, but rather than go and have PD and, let's say, office, right, rather than chop it into little units and it's still got the same facade, it still looks like an office, horrible really. Who wants to live in that, right? Rather than doing that, you can actually demolish it and rebuild it, new build, plus an additional up to two floors. And the basement as well, if it makes financial sense to do it. Yeah. So the great thing about that is, you've got the same volume that you would have if you just converted it, and actually a little bit more. But you can create good, well-designed space rather than literally trying to get something out of something that wasn't designed to be, nice housing, So I actually think that's really good, and something along those sorts of lines could be part of the answer, I think.
Well, and this goes back to some of the stuff we're talking about, which is about understanding and education. Because if you've got an office block in a city, but it's got an EPC rating of F or something like that. Soon there's policy coming in that says you're not going to be able to rent out that building, and there's lots of new shiny stuff being built, which is people are going to move into, and could it be converted into a housing development? The technology, it's really hard to do that. You've got the lift cord and where the toilets are, and the plumbing doesn't work and the light doesn't come in.
Yeah.
But if people were more aware of the opportunities from a more planning perspective in terms of going up in height, to add more floor area, or to do more than just the existing structure of the site.
Yeah.
That potentially they'd think about those opportunities more. I personally think that, and this goes back to my kind of technology hat on, that finding a toolkit or a methodology or technology that can convert this old building stock from up to the relevant C and above EPC rating from below, or converting office into resi and in an affordable way while making it sustainable. That's like literally the biggest opportunity in the entire world. There's a ticking time bomb coming for all of this stock, and it's just not going to be viable. And this is not just in London, this is in New York, this is in every major city that's kind of quite, been going for a while. The buildings are going to be empty and unusable. So finding a solution for that is just vast.
It's really interesting, actually, and that sort of leads us off on a little bit of a tangent around retrofit first, yeah? Which I don't know how familiar you are with that, but you know about the Marks and Spencer's case?
I'm not super familiar.
Okay, so this is a real high level little summary. So Marks and Spencer's in the West End, big store in the West End, submitted a planning application to knock it down and build a new one with a whole load of additional space. Really well designed scheme, and did all the proper assessments and stuff like that. And basically, it got called in and refused because certain people thought, in terms of carbon, it wasn't the most sustainable thing to do. They could have converted it instead. Yeah. So there's this big whole push around retrofit first. So basically, you should be converting things and repurposing them and reusing them, because that's more sustainable. In all of that embodied carbon is already there. Yeah, you don't have to go and
makes sense.
Create a whole
put a new
loads of new materials and all the stuff that comes into creating a brand new building, right? All of that's already there. And there, from a sustainability point of view, it's actually better to reuse it, right? Now, so purely, probably, depending on what it is from a carbon calculation point of view, that might be true, but is it? Well, two things really. Is it financially viable to do that? Yeah. So and would that create the best type and amount of new space? Yeah, and I'll tell you now, most of the time it won't, because converting things that weren't designed to be I don't know, let's go back to office. Converting an office into housing, and where it wasn't designed to be housing, it's never going to be as efficient as something that was designed bespoke, right? So a lot of the times, and it'd be interesting to see where this all goes. And this is part of the problem with planning and development. There's lots of competing things that are always happening, and the whole sustainability thing and carbon is another big part of that now. So it's really balance all of these things and make it financially viable, because this is a key thing that I think lots and lots of people sort of forget and ignore. From a development point of view, unless you've got free or subsidised land, most things have got an existing use value, so they're worth what they're worth as they are. In order to make it worth someone's while to go through all of the effort and the cost and the significant risk to create housing, to make stuff happening, there's got to be some profit in it. Landowners also need to be incentivised to sell. If the numbers are right, it's just not gonna happen. And very often, people that got all these great ideas about how things should be in an ideal world, well, everything should be net zero. Everything should be, I don't know, whatever. Numerous things. It's great, but we've also got to understand that the implications of what that all means for viability. Because, and I think part of the problem is, and again, it's one of the reasons for doing this, a lot of people out there think, you could do it if you wanted to. It's just greedy developers, making too much money. That's why they're not doing it. Well, that is not why they're not doing it. They most of the time they're not doing it because it's not financially viable, and you can't come up with enough of a land value to persuade the landowner to do a deal.
That's especially with the conversions. It's just not. There's no way of solving this problem right now. How do you solve that?
Well, I think one of the ways we solve it, hopefully once everyone else starts understanding how it really works in terms of land economics, and it's like, oh shit. And two things really. Understanding, these are two, I think, really important things that lots of sort of stakeholders and other influential people involved in the sector don't really get, is I don't think everyone really gets the whole thing around existing use values and having to maximise land values to get deals done. I don't think they understand that, and I also don't think many people understand that not all developers are greedy arseholes making fortunes. This is a super risky business, and there are a lot of us that really do want to create good stuff and do it in the right way,
So if a building's, I don't know as much about this as you, right? This is not exactly where we fit in, but if a building's in a city centre, it was once a really good location, had filled with businesses paying them rent, and now it's become somewhat dilapidated, and it's not half occupied, or even with the work from home stuff, it might not be 25% occupied a lot of the time. And it's got a low EPC rating. How do you value that piece of land these days, and what is, I mean, it's effectively valueless, right? It's going to run out of value.
So obviously, everything's got a potential residual use value based on what you might be able to do with it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, look, things can never be converted, everything needs to be knocked down, because that isn't the case. There are things that can be, converted. Some of them, easier and better than others. So absolutely, where possible, if you can still economically and efficiently convert existing buildings and get enough, optimize and maximize the space, then that's a good thing to do. That is the way to go. So loads of those buildings. I mean, it's happening all the time. It's not like all these buildings are going to sit there with nothing happening.
So you think it can be affordable to fit out a low EPC rating building at an affordable rate, to bring it up to the required level at a price that's going to recoup its investment in a...
Dependent on where it is. So, and this is the classic thing I think other people don't understand. People coming back to the green belt, right? They assume that green belt is fields and trees, which is, as we know. and they talk about, well, why aren't developers only want to do that because it's cheaper and it's easy. Well, maybe it's not so much because it's cheaper and easier. Maybe because it's just that's what's viable and other stuff isn't. And then people say, well, why aren't you just developing on brownfield land? Well, most of the time we are, but there are certain parts of the country whereby it's just not viable to develop on brownfield land. Like, certain lower value places, particularly in, just lower value areas, lots of north and stuff like that. You've got places that are like 150 quid a square foot sales values. Yeah, so out of that 150 quid a square, I mean that's like definitely on the low side, but there are a lot of places like that, 150, 200, 250 quid a foot, low value areas. Very often, many of them covered in brownfield sites. Yeah, and well, why can't you develop there? Well, because the end value is 150 quid a square foot, and to demolish it, decontaminate it, and do all of the other things I've got to do, it's going to cost me 250 quid a square foot. And that's before you've even got any profit or paid for the land. It's just not financially viable. And it's like that everywhere, but to a greater or lesser degree. And I think there's a whole lot of people, certainly the general public, they don't understand that. They don't understand that greenbelt isn't all fields. They don't understand that brownfield isn't easy to develop. And they don't understand that at the end of the day, landowners have got to be incentivised to sell and developers have got to be incentivised to build, because it's a super risky business. So much so that, and this is one of my sort of like big aims, is to support and encourage more new, smaller house builders and SME developers, because, as you know, they're all disappearing because it's such a risky business. And that's not bullshit that I know certain people think. Well, like, go and look at the figures. It's like, if development's as easy as some people like to imagine it is, and we're all like billionaires flying around in helicopters, why are so many of them going bust all the time?
No, we know this from our data as well. We're a subscription model, so people pay for us 1 year, then they pay for us the next year, and you kind of share the cost of development across all your customers, and it's a nice way to provide a good service. But you don't have to resubscribe, and there's a new line of churn that comes into our business, which is no site finding requirement, and that's kind of grown over the last couple of years, because small developers, they're either sitting on their hands waiting for the environment to change, or they've gone bust, or they've been acquired, or they've got into things of bad debts occurred. Yeah. Like, they're struggling.
Yeah, they are, and it's interesting. So let's finally maybe finish up on finance, yeah, because that's sort of part, well, not sort of, definitely part of the whole process. So, I often talk about all the surveys that have been done over the years into the biggest barriers to growth for house builders, particularly small ones. And it's always land and planning, and a lot of people also cite finance. Yeah. Now, and as I always say, when you get good at land and planning, i.e. you find the right off-market sites and you get good at adding maximum planning value to them, and you're not paying too much for them before you've even started, then the finance thing isn't really much of a problem, or as much of a problem. But it can be for some people. So I know you're doing stuff with funding now as well. How's that working?
So we identified that there's kind of there's loads of challenges. We've talked about some of the challenges for developers: finding a piece of land, going through planning, and getting funding. Are kind of three well-known, very time-consuming parts of the process. So we thought, what can we do to help in that part of the process? So the finances, we've got Land Insight for finding land, we've got Give My View for helping with planning, and we've got something called Land Fund for getting financing. And there's two parts to it. The first part is a development appraisal calculator. So it demystifies valuing a piece of land. So it's a really simple way to put in all of the information you need to spit out things like the land cost, but also your cash flow over the course of the project. And it's not the super detailed cost schedule that you'll need, that's always changing as people are not delivering things on time and you haven't around, but it makes a small or someone who doesn't have a finance background, a developer, be able to look super presentable, really thoughtful, and present it to a bank or a funder in a way that is exactly how they would expect it. So it enables you to takes you through the process of looking like you've done the maths, you've considered all the options and angles and risks, and you've got it all documented, and this is how it spits out in terms of the scheme.
Yeah.
And
then what happens?
Well, and then we'll help you fund the site as well.
Well, how does that work?
So that is, at the minute, frankly, it's just a bit of a simple brokerage, but it's a service that we offer. If you want to get lending, we can help you because we know all the best lenders. We've got all the reviews from all our clients about how they work. So we've got a really good choice of lenders that cater for all different sizes of projects. And the good thing about us is we're super secure, data security. We're top notch on security. You've got I'd like to think, the friendliest, best service in the market. And we're a great company to work with that's trying to help you in many other ways. And so we can do other things in there as well. Like if you get lending from us, maybe you can get your Land Insight license for free as well. And we can just shuffle things around to make the whole service of things that we offer to you just the most competitive. It's the best value thing you can get in the market. It's an interesting one because it's a transaction fee. If we help you and we're successful, we get a fee. If we don't or we can't, then we don't. And we've got actually a 100% success record so far. But we're a SaaS business, so we're a subscription model business. So we're not actually valued on that, and it's not part of our business model. It's an additional service that we offer because we know it's valuable and we know we can help. It's part of the Landtech ethos of doing things not just in this super transactional way, hard selling. We're trying to solve the problem for our customers. So we've got a community platform that people go onto where they can network with their peers. They get advice, they get loads of education. There's a little area where they can promote sites and services to each other. We don't even charge for that. That's just part of the overall package because we're trying to help in all of the peripheral ways that the developer has problems with.
Yeah. So just come back to the land fund thing. So is there any way people could get access to that if they weren't customers?
They get access to the service, but not the software tool.
Yeah.
But there's an affordable way to get that software tool.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Very good. Okay.
There is one other thing that I think is interesting, just based on what you said before, and I think that. I don't know how much your listeners care about this, but there's a new wave of technology coming in called generative AI. These large language models, OpenAI, ChatGPT, all this kind of stuff. Your llamas and your bards, and what I think is really interesting is that you say the general public don't understand how things work and what the challenges a developer has and the challenges of a site in of itself. And our value proposition is that we've gathered all this data from all these really hard to reach sources, PDF documents scattered all over the place. We've built this really good technology to bring that in, and you have to normalize it so you can, even though something's written in a different way, it means the same thing. And we're experts at that. We've done that with planning policy, we've done that with planning applications. So we've built this data bank of information about sites, and we're constantly feeding that with new data sets, SCHLA data, market data, demographic data, amenities, and we're kind of building up this picture of how places work. So I do think that in the future we're going to see some really interesting things about. Our users generally know how to interpret that data with various levels of proficiency. But when you apply these large language models and this ability to analyze and interpret those data sets, we can really help the wider public understand all the information about their community, about the sites and what's going on those sites. So I do think we're at a really interesting technology cusp, in the same way that, you know, mobile came in from desktop or social media came in. There's a really interesting time, and I think that we've got some nice things coming that will be of a lot of interest to people. Actually, Paul, you mentioned something before that I thought was interesting, which is about people not really understanding some of the challenges that developers have, particularly when, say, dealing with a brownfield site, which might need massive remediation. Got there.
It's easy for you to say.
Yeah, right. So it might need it might have a whole load of challenges with the soil or the ground or what's in there already, and the unforeseen nature of what's going to come up when you start looking for it. But I think that that you can kind of take that problem and consider that with quite a few of the other challenges that developers are facing into, and the land market in general. And what I think is really interesting is that you know, what we've done at Landtech is gather documents from very hard to reach sources, whether it's a planning application or policy document, or, you know, a partnership that we've created that we've had to work hard for, and we gather that information. We have to make it make sense with each other, so that you know, just because someone's written a planning application in one way, someone who's written it a different way, but it could be exactly the same thing. You know, 5 houses with 4 bedrooms, and they've just used words and letters. So we have to make it all normalized. And then we do that, and we normalize our data across all of the different data sets so we can work together. And we've got this great picture of how a site can be thought about, and the challenges a site has from maybe a geometry perspective, or even an environmental perspective, or a market perspective, or a political planning perspective. And we give that data. That's what we do. We sell that data to people who make sense of it because they know how to interpret that data. But with large language models and generative AI coming in, this is like a new wave of technology, in the same way that mobile came in from desktop and cloud computing, and social media changed the way people communicate. This wave of AI is enabling these massive data sets that we've collected with billions of data points to be interpreted. And so I don't exactly know how it's going to play out, but it's definitely useful because it's going to demystify some of the challenges and enable a place where questions can be asked by the general public about either a site or about their community or about a wider area. And they're going to get a very good response that's gone across all of the different data sets, done its research and summarized it in a really easy way to understand. And the potential of that, I mean, is vast, because it'll help people do more technical things before they need to employ a technical person, and have a good understanding of what they're going to deal with, which just saves time and money and enables you to think about things in a better way. But also it means that consumers and people in the market will have a better understanding of what's going on, and so they'll be better informed when they're buying their properties, or want to engage with the planning system, or are thinking about how to get involved with how their community is being shaped and who's involved in it. That is the opening up of the land market that, you know, we kind of talked about in the early days, and it's really becoming on the cusp of being very possible now.
Yeah, interesting, really interesting. Okie dokie. So look, obviously I love Landtech, and I'm very biased for obvious reasons. But you know, obviously it's interesting, like we were the first, and then, you know, a few, you know, there's other people that have come up with site finding software and things like that ever since. And I talk about this a lot when I'm talking to people. I do say there are inferior alternatives if people want to use those. There are. I mean, you know, no one's been going as long as us. No one's got as much data or information or features as us. So, you know, people can do what they want. I'm not here to sell Landtech, but it is the best.
Well, the difference is we understand the customer.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, it's a very good point actually, because again, as I used to say right at the beginning, one of the advantages we had is like was from the beginning the customer, whether it's starting off as a one-man band to me being headland for the biggest developer in the country. So and all of that originally and since has fed into you've got the biggest and the best customers, including many of the PLC house builders. So I think Landtech's the best. Obviously, for people that aren't familiar with it, that perhaps want to check it out or get in touch, how would they do that?
I mean, our website's very good. It's got a ton of information on that people could valuable, and then through that you can easily get in touch if you want a demonstration or anything like that. We're big on social media. We're on LinkedIn. We post regularly. I'm on there posting for myself. So if you want to engage with me, I'm very happy to engage over platforms like that. We're at all the big events. We're one of our values, as you know, is being people driven, and we'd love for people to get in touch however
Cool.
However they can.
Okay. Oh well, look, this has been good. We'll do another one at some point. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Thanks for tuning in to Inside Property Development. Please remember to like and subscribe. Do join us every week where we'll be speaking to house builders, developers, experts, planners, and everyone involved in trying to get more much needed housing created the right way. We'll learn together how we can collaborate rather than fight, and by working together, we can all help create better places, spaces and homes and a much more beautiful world.